Good morning, everyone. So, I wanted to make this video to kind of explain the different content that's coming out on this channel and what I am attempting to do with this channel. If you don't know my name is Kendra, and if you don't know my story, I was in an abusive relationship for 9 years. And I recently I've divorced 4 years ago, and I have been walking through picking up the pieces of my life, and I have named this channel Beauty and Salvation, which I changed the name of this channel probably about a year ago, or 6 months to a year ago, and I didn't know what that meant. There's a psalm in the Bible where, David asks Lord to beautify me with your salvation, and that has been one of my prayers in the morning, to beautify me with salvation. And I didn't know what that meant when I changed the name and I started to pray that. And one thing that I have noticed is that when I was in that relationship with my ex-husband, I didn't realize how much of my autonomy had been taken away. And autonomy is the ability to think for yourself and do things for yourself, which if you've been through narcissistic abuse, that is something that is stolen from you. You can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, you can't talk to anyone, you do what they want you to do, and they don't steal it all at once, they steal it little by little. And the longer I was with him, the more of my autonomy I was losing, because and even before then, on my walk with God, it wasn't just the abusive relationship that was, that was something that I went through. I also was in heavy drug addiction. And so I was battling that before I even battled the abuse, which that also stole my autonomy, because doing drugs is definitely a lifestyle. And I was doing hard drugs, IV cocaine, heroin, methamphetamines. The list of the drugs I didn't do is a lot shorter. And I was just a rebellious young person, in my early 20s, and I've been sober from drugs for about 12 years now. And God has been slowly putting the pieces of my life back together. And so one thing that we're doing now is I'm learning how to be good on my own, and to really lean on him and to allow him to be my spouse. I was never a person that really went from relationship to relationship. And so we've been working on, codependency and things of that nature, being an anxious attacher, and really walking through that, and him showing me what parts of me are codependent, what parts of me anxiously attach to other people. And so he's really showing me how to live the way he wants me to be able to go freely and to do the things that I need to do and things that I want to do without needing the approval of somebody else. So that's what these videos are. They're videos of just going out to eat, going and just experiencing different things. Yesterday I went to the feed store and I videoed it. And, it doesn't matter that I went alone. It doesn't matter. I used to do that a lot before my relationship. I used to go places alone a lot. Go to the movies alone. I'd go to the club alone, which is very dangerous. I don't recommend that. But I had a lot more autonomy way before my relationship, and I didn't realize how much of it was stolen. So that's what this channel is about. It's about regaining autonomy after a life of abuse, after divorce, especially from an abusive relationship or any relationship that had such control over you, because I was under a lot of control. I worked 10 to 12 hours a day with UPS, and so my days were filled with working all the time. And when I was home on the weekends, I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to do anything. And even if I wanted to go somewhere or do anything, I was punished for wanting to do those things. And they weren't anything bad. It's just he didn't want me to go anywhere because he didn't want to go. So I started just going places without him. If I wanted to go out to eat and he didn't want to go, fine, I'll go by myself. And that really drove a wedge between us, you know, because I wanted to do things and he didn't want to do things. And so I just started going alone. And my marriage progressed to a point that was dangerous, where I no longer was safe to come home. I was no longer safe in my own home. And it took probably a year and a half, because I tried to file for divorce in 2020, and as you know, a lot of people did, and we weren't able because the court systems were backed up. So it wasn't until 2021 I actually filed for divorce, and then in September of 2022 we were actually formally divorced. And so this has been my journey, and the things that I've been working on is getting back to the person that I used to be. And not even really the person I used to be, because that person was also lost. And so now I'm finding new things about myself that have been hidden, because even the person I was before I met him was not a healthy person. I was not a healthy person. My identity was in things of this world, and I didn't even know what an identity in Christ was, in being who God made me to be. We are the most beneficial to people when we can walk in our own identity that God has given us. And it's not something that somebody else wants you to be. It's what God pulls out of you through the journey. And that's what's important, is because that's where you help the most people, is when you walk in your God-given identity, and that's where you're able to help the most. So this channel is very real, it's very raw, and I am navigating content creation as well as being a single mother now, because I have 2 children. So I'm a single mom, 2 children, live in Section 8 housing. I mean, I was homeless after the divorce, so I've navigated homelessness. I've navigated going through the shelter process. I was at a women's shelter for battered and abused women, and that's how I got my first apartment after homelessness. I was homeless for 90 days. And I really learned how to lean on God, and how to see his hand and how everything works when you're in that dire of a situation. I mean, I was praying every day, I was reading scripture every day, and just praying to God for this home that I had given up, because I basically gave up my whole life. I had to. I didn't have a choice. My life was completely shattered. And in scripture it says, those who give up their life for me will find it, and those who hang on to their life will lose it. So I ended up giving up my life 5 years ago on Easter, and telling God, okay, Lord, I am going to give up everything, because there was nothing that I wanted to keep. There was nothing that I wanted to keep, because my life was just a dead end. It was just a dead end, and I was tired. I was tired of things not working. I was tired of being empty, because I was so empty inside. And I was just felt like a hamster on a hamster wheel, just running and never achieving anything. So on the day that I felt he was calling me, and it was something I didn't want to do. And usually when God gives you an idea, it's something that you don't want to do. You're like, that's a horrible idea. Because what he was asking me to do was pack a bag and move into my car, and he was going to provide a home. And I was like, that doesn't sound that doesn't sound fun. That doesn't sound easy, and that's definitely something I don't want to do. But I did it. Because the reality for some of these women that are facing abuse and they're in abusive situations, it's not just their spouse that's abusive. They may come from an abusive home where their family members are toxic, so going home is not an option. And if you're with a narcissist, he's probably separated you from your whole support system, which mine was trying to do, just trying to separate me from everything. So you don't have anywhere to turn. Going home to your parents is not an option. You know, they leave you financially strained, where you don't have a job, you don't have any money, you don't have family, you don't have friends, you don't have anything. You know, and that's a reality for some of us that are going through narcissistic abuse, is that the narcissist, that's the whole gig of the narcissist, is to separate you from everything and everyone. And I'm not telling you to go out and live in your car, but for reality for some of us is you're going to be homeless after you leave, and that's why you don't leave. And I want to note that abuse doesn't stop just because you leave. They torment you after, which I went through that too. I was tormented after leaving for months, fighting back and forth with him, and it was awful. I was on my knees begging God to do something, begging God to deliver me, begging God. I was begging for a different life. And he gave it to me in a way that I didn't want. I didn't think it would work. I didn't know what he was doing. But I was so desperate for something new and for something different. And I had to make a decision. The first decision was to leave. The second decision was, to, figure out a way to leave, figure out a way to go. And I'm so blessed to be able, that I did go to my parents' house. I did move in with them. And, it was extremely hard, especially after leaving, because I just felt like the last 9 years of my life were a lie. And to come to terms with that the person never really loved you, that everything was a lie, that, as you were trying to build, he's trying to burn it down. There was a lot of anger, there was a lot of bitterness, there was a lot of resentment, there was every emotion just comes flooding in, because there are so many wounds that they inflict on you and they do to you through their antics, in order to control you. And I had to sit with myself and fight not to go back, because this time I didn't want to go back. Because in the past it was, we'd fight, I'd pack my things, go live with my mom for the weekend, and then come back home. He'd apologize, things would be all right, and then we'd get into another fight, and that was our cycle, that was our pattern. But when I finally made the decision to divorce and to leave, I packed up a whole 2-story house by myself, furniture and all, because everything was mine. And I left, and I put it all in storage, and I left him with his stuff. And of course, he tried to apologize. He tried to get me to come back. But I wasn't about to unpack that storage unit again and move it all back in again. I wasn't about to do that. And I think because I made that big of a step that last time, that is what kept me from going back. Because that's not where I wanted to be. He had threatened my safety, and not just my safety, the safety of our children. I came home to him pointing a gun at me for not answering text messages while I was at work. And the reason I didn't answer messages is because I was a driver. I drove for a living. And all he wanted to do was argue. It wasn't about building me up. He would just make me cry. So I told him, I don't want to talk to you while I'm at work, because all you want to do is argue and fight and go round in circles. And our arguments, our fights lead to nothing. They lead to nowhere. They lead to no solutions, because everything was my fault. I was the problem when I was the one working 12 hours a day and he was at home with the kids, with our one son who was 3. And I came home to him wielding a gun, drunk, on Xanax, and he fired a gun. He had fired a round off in the garage, and they got mad at me that I didn't come to check to see if he'd blown his head off in front of our 3-year-old. And we had just found out I was pregnant. So, by the grace of God, we ended up not being a murder-suicide that night. I called his mother. She was able to talk him into putting the gun down, because he's a veteran. He was bipolar, and he had a lot of trauma that he was not willing to walk through or heal from. And so his trauma, and he was a victim of everything. Everything was everybody else's fault of why he was the way he was, and he used that as an excuse to treat me the way that he did. So he would have killed me, would have killed our 3-year-old, and probably would have shot himself. But by the grace of God, he didn't. And I think I still stayed with him another year after that. I went through many threats of suicide, where he made me watch a suicide attempt one night. And, when I packed my bags the next day, he couldn't believe that I was leaving. And he finished off the GHB that he had, and he got in the car and drove. And they found him passed out in an intersection. And finally, when the emergency room got a hold of me, they were like, what did he take? Because we Narcaned him and he didn't come to. I said, well, he took GHB, which is the date rape drug. And that's why Narcan isn't working. He then went to behavioral health, and he was in there for about 7 days, and then they released him. And it was all an act, because he didn't want change. He just wanted me to comply. Which I did for 9 years. I tried to help him as much as I could, but he wasn't willing to do the work. He wasn't willing to unpack his trauma and heal, and he wanted to remain a victim. And that is also narcissistic. Just a perpetual victim. Everything was everybody else's fault. He had an identity of victimhood, and he was not willing to let it go, because he didn't want to come to terms that he had to face the consequences of some of his actions. And that's just the truth of what happened to me. And I know there are millions of women that are in silence right now. And, through this channel, I'd like to show you that there is another side. There is a path to healing. You can gain back your autonomy. And it's not easy. It's very painful. I had to face the things that were done to me, not only through my marriage, but also in childhood. The wounds that led me into that cycle of abuse, because he wasn't just the first one. I had allowed it to happen multiple times. I just didn't know it. But it was the worst with him because I actually married him. But it would have been a pattern in any relationship that I got into. So I've been single for 4 years now. And it hasn't been easy and it hasn't been fun. But to anybody that is leaving narcissistic abuse, it's very much needed. Because when I divorced, I took it upon myself to learn where I went wrong and to spot out red flags, because I didn't want to repeat the same mistakes going forward. I wanted to know where I messed up. I wanted to know the things I ignored and I shouldn't have. Then I couldn't see it. I can see it now. And I'm working through, learning how to guard my heart. Learning how to guard myself from people that are predators. Even the ones that come with a smile on their face and they're so put together. Because there's different types of narcissism. There's the malignant. There's the covert, and the covert are the hardest to spot because they're the ones that are charismatic. They're the ones that are the leaders in the community. They're active in church. They just look like the greatest people. But underneath that mask is a person who they present one way to everybody else, but behind closed doors, they're a monster. And those are the most dangerous ones. I mean, Ted Bundy, for example. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was a well-respected man in his community. And yet, look at what he was doing behind closed doors. 1 in 10 people is a narcissist. Not every narcissist is a psychopath or a sociopath, but every sociopath and psychopath is a narcissist. And if you don't know how to see it, you need to learn. Because if you're kind-hearted, loving, trusting, these are the type of people you will gravitate, that you will attract. You will attract these types of people. And they will love bomb you. And they will get you into a relationship real quick. And they don't take it all from you at once. They take it from you little by little. And then you get years down the road and you can't leave because you're bonded to them. And then you're sitting there thinking, how did I get here? How did I get here? And so if my story can help someone navigate through that, then that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. So if this is something that you're interested in, I'll keep going. If you know somebody, then you can hang out and hopefully relay the message. Like, follow, share the page. And I just hope to help more and more women get free.